Good morning, all. I welcome for today's morning's breakfast session under the aegis of IACTA Bangalore. Today we have one of the most great pointers talk. He is none other than Dr. Murali sir. He is a great pointer and passionate and great teacher. He is the backbone of our academic day-to-day programs. He likes to be regular in the academic activities. He was very much upset last week due to postponement of the Monday's talk, sir, due to unavoidable circumstances. I regret for that, sir. Today, he will take us through the assessment of TE of aortic valve in aortic stenosis, sir. Dr. Kanchi, sir, I would like to ask Kanchi, sir, to proceed his talking, sir.
Good morning and thank you for that kind introduction. Can you see my slide?
Yes, sir.
I would like to thank FCA for conducting these training and teaching programs, which have been quite useful, both to the practicing anesthesiologists as well as the new entrants into the subject of cardiac anesthesia. And today I'll be discussing with you some of the salient features of echocardiography for aortic stenosis. I'll be mainly dealing with two-dimensional echocardiography, which is fundamental to the basic understanding. Even for 3D, you need to have a good 2D understanding. And I'll be dealing with valvular aortic stenosis and not the supravalvular or subvalvular aortic stenosis. As you are aware, the prevalence of aortic disease is steadily progressing as the population is aging. And if you look at the valve procedures done in United States of America, the aortic valve procedures is the most common procedure done in United States of America. And because of the prevalence of rheumatic heart disease in Asian subcontinent, we have almost predominantly mitral valve, but in next few years, I am sure that aortic valve will be leading cause for valvular diseases and hence the interventions in this subcontinent. If you look at the calcific aortic valve disease burden, if you look at the disease burden of calcific aortic valve disease, this is the upper one is the incidence, second one is the prevalence, third one is the mortality rates. And on the horizontal axis is the year 1990 to up to 1920, close to 1920. You can see that the incidence, prevalence, and the death due to aortic valve disease, that is the calcific aortic valve disease, is progressively increasing. So please note this point, and hence in the coming years we are likely to see more of aortic valve disease than any other valvular heart disease. If you look at the valve replacements, the number of valve replacements done in the world is about 300,000. And in India, the total number of transcatheter aortic valve replacements or transcatheter aortic valve implantations, which is called as TAVR or TAVI, is on the rise. So this Indian statistics, and you can see that in the year 2018, we have done about 600 TAVR procedures in India. Coming to the etiology, when you look at the morphology of the aortic valve, we need to look into the cusp mobility, thickness, and the calcification. And when you use the color interrogation, you can look at the regurgitation or turbulence which is occurring in the aortic valve in the patients who have aortic regurgitation and aortic stenosis respectively. Use of Doppler interrogation allows the determination of level of obstruction and the grade or the severity of the lesion, especially when you're talking about aortic stenosis. The gradient, measurement of gradient is an important component of determination of severity of aortic stenosis. And when we look at in the echocardiography, especially at the transesophageal echocardiography, there are 4 standard views. To this, we need to add the 5th standard view, that is the 5-chamber view. The 4 standard views are mid-esophageal aortic valve short axis view, mid-esophageal aortic valve long axis view, deep transgastric long axis view, and the transgastric long axis view. And as I said, we also need to add the 5-chamber view in the mid-esophageal window at 0 to 20 degrees. Coming to the mid-esophageal aortic valve short axis view, the multiplane angle is about 40 degrees, and you can see the aortic valve usually trileaflet. Normal structure is trileaflet valve, and you have the left coronary cusp, the right coronary cusp, and the non-coronary cusp. And it resembles the Mercedes-Benz sign, and hence it is usual to describe aortic valve as Mercedes-Benz, having a sign of Mercedes-Benz. And then if you freeze the picture and go to the mid-systole, you can planning the aortic valve area and determine the aortic valve area, which is useful as one of the parameters to quantify aortic stenosis. The second view is the mid-esophageal aortic valve long axis view. The multiplane angle here is about 120 to 140 degrees. In the near field, you see the left atrium, the far field left ventricle, the mitral valve in between, and the cusps of the aortic valve, the right coronary cusp at the far field, and either the non-coronary or the left coronary cusp in the near field, and the root of the aorta is clearly visualized in this view. Coming to transgastric and deep transgastric long axis view of the aortic valve. Once in the transgastric position, if you increase the angle to about 100 to 120, you get the long axis view, where you will see the aortic valve at the far end of the field. And now the cross-sectional area is being shown. The angle has to be increased to be able to see the aortic valve opening up. And then in the deep transgastric view at 0 degrees, 0 to 20 degrees, you acutely antiflex the probe and look at the LVOT, aortic valve, and the aorta. And in these two views, the echo beam is more or less parallel to the blood flow, and hence the best view to visualize or interrogate the aortic valve in terms of determination of the gradients and Doppler flow velocities. So, and this is the 5-chamber view, where it is a mid-esophageal window at 0 degrees. You withdraw the probe to about 1 or 2 centimeters, you get the 5-chamber view. And you can also use the biplane and also use the 3D, but I will not be dealing mostly with the 3D. What are the recommendations for data recording and measurement for aortic stenosis? We have the LVOT diameter. In the TTE, the transesophageal, you use the 2D parasternal long axis view, and LVOT velocity, where you use the pulse wave Doppler. This is the method to determine the LVOT velocity time integral, and AS jet velocity is used Again, in a view where the echo beam is parallel to the blood flow and the valve anatomy can be studied using the 2D echocardiography. What are the measures of aortic stenosis severity as obtained by Doppler echocardiography? These are the jet velocity. If it is more than 4 meters per second, it qualifies to be called as severe aortic stenosis. The mean gradient of more than 40 millimeters and the valve area less than 1 square centimeter again qualifies to be called as severe aortic stenosis. Some other measurements are mentioned here. You can also planimeter the aortic valve. Usually the continuity equation is used because that is more accurate as compared to the planimetry. But you can use either technique as long as you're accurate. And the other measurements of aortic valve which have been described in the recent literature include percentage stroke work loss of left ventricle. The cutoff value is 25%. Pressure recovery gradient. The energy loss index of 0.5 is the cutoff value. Valvular arterial impedance. Aortic valve resistance. Projected valve area at the normal flow rate. These are all the other additional parameters which can be taken into consideration when you are determining the severity of the aortic valve. But for our purposes, as long as we know the peak gradient, the mean gradient, the aortic valve area, that should be suffice for us. And also you can include dimensionless index, which is the ratio of the velocity in the LVOT as compared to the aortic valve velocity. If you are able to get accurate or precise measurement of these 4 parameters, that should be fine. The valve area, and also if you would like to include, you can include the indexed valve area, the peak velocity, and the mean pressure gradient, or the things or the parameters which are important for the day-to-day calculation or determination of severe aortic stenosis. This picture shows the maximum velocity tracing, which is used to calculate the mean pressure gradient. This is the mild one shown on the left side and severe one shown on the right side. And here there are 2 pictures shown. This is the continuous wave Doppler tracings in a patient with mild, moderate aortic stenosis compared to that with patient with a dynamic left ventricular outflow tract obstruction. You can see the difference in the tracing. Continuity equation is used to determine the aortic valve area. There are 4 parameters in this equation: the LVOT area, the aortic valve area, LVOT velocity, and the velocity across the aortic valve. Because we would like to measure the aortic valve area, if you substitute all the values on the right side of the equation, we will be able to determine the aortic valve area in a precise manner. This is supposed to be more accurate than the planimetry, because planimetry you have to cross section the valve exactly at the tips of the valve leaflets in mid-systole to be able to get the correct estimation of the aortic valve area. The left ventricular outflow tract diameter is measured in a zoomed view if you're using parasternal long axis view in TTE, or the LV aortic valve long axis view, aortic valve long axis view in TEE. The principle is the same. You measure from the inner edge to the inner edge about anywhere from 5 to 10 millimeters from the aortic annulus, and then get the diameter, and this can be used to determine the cross-sectional area and also to stroke volume if you would like to measure the stroke volume. In patients who have low pressure low flow, low gradient aortic stenosis, dopamine protocol has been described. Low dose dopamine is described in this study, where you start the patient in a controlled condition in a CCU setting with proper monitoring. Dopamine in a dose of 2 to 5 microgram per kg per minute is infused, and you can increase the dose of dopamine up to 20 microgram depending upon the response. Maximum dopamine dose should not exceed 20 microgram per kg per minute. And if there is an effective aortic valve area is more than 1.2 square centimeters, the stenosis is not severe. Severe stenosis is suggested by jet velocity of more than 4 meters per second or mean gradient more than 40 millimeters, provided the aortic valve area does not exceed 1 square centimeters at any flow rate. Absence of contractile reserve, that is failure to increase stroke volume by more than 20%, is a predictor of high surgical mortality and poor long-term outcome. Although the valve replacement may improve left ventricular function and even may improve the left ventricular function, but if the you demonstrate absence of contractile function using low dose dopamine test, it is an indication that the surgical results are not likely to be the best. Let us take this case of a 68-year-old man who has shortness of breath and chest pain, and he had syncope in the last year. So the classical or the triad of symptoms of aortic stenosis is breathlessness, chest pain, and syncope. And once the patient becomes symptomatic, the natural history dictates that the lifespan is anywhere from 2 to 5 years. So it is imperative that once a patient is symptomatic, the patient has to be subjected to some sort of intervention as soon as possible, because of the natural history dictates that the patient is likely to suffer mortality within a few months to years. This patient had a loud systolic measure, that is the ejection systolic number, the aortic area, which was radiating to the right carotid, and the heart rate was 88, and the Doppler examination demonstrated a valve opening with a gradient of 54 millimeters of mercury. Mean gradient is 54, and this was a case of calcific aortic stenosis. This is a degenerative condition associated with aging. There is no commissural fusion as compared to those with rheumatic heart disease. And the systolic orifice is stellate. This is the echo picture, and you can do the biplane imaging and you can calculate the grading. The mean pressure gradient here is calculated as 57 millimeters in the transgastric long axis view, and in the deep transgastric view again you measure the gradient, and the morphology of the valve can be determined using the short axis view. You have the aortic valve can be tricuspid, bicuspid, or unicuspid, and usually the bicuspid valve is associated with aortic stenosis, but other types of valves such as quadricuspid and unicuspid, usually there is regurgitation. Coming to grading of the aortic stenosis, the aortic stenosis is graded as severe if the jet velocity is greater than 4 meters per second, mean gradient is greater than 40 millimeters of mercury, aortic valve area is less than 1.0 square centimeters, index aortic valve area less than 0.6 square centimeters per meter square. When we talk about aortic stenosis, three factors must be kept in mind when you're interpreting the echocardiographic data. First one is that the ejection fraction is underestimated in the presence of aortic stenosis. So the ejection fraction of 40 does not really indicate that the patient is having depressed LV function. The ejection fraction is a reflection of the end-diastolic volume in relation to the stroke volume. Hence, because of the aortic stenosis, the ejection fraction may be underestimated, but if it is less than 40, the LV function may be considered to be impaired. The second factor I would like to mention is that the maximum pressure gradient measured in the echocardiography, that is the instantaneous pressure gradient. This is the instantaneous pressure gradient measured in the echocardiography is higher than what is measured in the catheterization lab. The main difference is that in the catheterization lab, we are measuring the peak to peak gradient in 2 different cardiac cycles. Whereas in the echocardiography, we are measuring the gradient across the aortic valve, which is instantaneous and in the single cardiac cycle. And hence, the difference between the pressure gradient, the pressure gradient, the maximum pressure gradient is higher as compared to the catheterization derived values. This must be kept in mind. The third thing I would like to mention is about what is called as a pressure recovery effect. When the blood flow passes through a narrowed orifice, a portion of the potential energy, that is the pressure energy here, is converted to kinetic energy, which is velocity, as a result of which there's a loss of pressure in this area. And as the blood flows across, there is recovery of the pressure. And this leads to a sort of dissipation of kinetic energy. And this leads to what we call as pressure recovery phenomenon, and the maximum pressure gradient recorded by echocardiography is diminished, and hence this must be kept in mind. The second case is that a patient, the second case is that of a 65-year-old male complaining of shortness of breath and chest discomfort. So he's symptomatic. Again, he says he has physical signs of aortic stenosis. And only thing is here, the ejection fraction is 25%. Mean gradient across the aortic valve was 25. Valve area is 0.8. Which this is this fits into the category of low flow, low gradient aortic stenosis. And here we need to subject the patient to dobutamine stress echocardiography. And if the gradient increases, for example, on the top upper panel, if the gradient increases with dobutamine, the aortic valve gradient, mean gradient has gone up from 24 to 47, and the aortic valve area remains same, but the cardiac output has increased. The ejection fraction is increased. This means that this patient is likely to have this is a true aortic stenosis, and if this patient is likely to have excellent results following aortic valve surgery, vis-a-vis a patient where the gradient is slightly increased, then no change in the aortic valve area, some improvement in the cardiac output. This again is likely to do good, but if the pressure gradient does not increase with dobutamine or actually decreases and the valve area may increase, cardiac output does not increase, this represents a failure of the contractile function, and hence this patient is unlikely to do well in the long term, even though he might survive the operative procedure. The second disease condition which causes aortic stenosis is rheumatic heart disease, usually associated with aortic regurgitation. It is characterized by commissural fusion, which is a differentiating point from the aortic stenosis caused by degenerative disease, and usually associated with other valvular lesions. The third usual cause is the bicuspid aortic valve, which is a congenital abnormality which is not detected during childhood and usually manifests after 20 years of age. And the commonest type is the fusion of the right and left coronary cusps, as is shown here. And usually there is a raphe between the two leaflets which are fused. The echocardiographic picture is being shown here. Usually the orifice is elliptical. And the operative picture is shown here. The aortic valve is bicuspid. At the bottom panel, the quadricuspid aortic valve is seen, but we are not dealing with this now because usually quadricuspid aortic valve is associated with aortic regurgitation. We are talking about bicuspid aortic valve. Usually, these patients who have bicuspid aortic valve have associated aortopathy, so the ascending aortic dimensions must be determined, and if it qualifies, you might have to replace the ascending aorta in these patients, proximal ascending aorta. The third case is an elderly, actually aged male of 84 years who is had CABG done 10 years ago, who is a diabetes, who has history of diabetes and worsening breathlessness, and has severe aortic stenosis, valve area of 0.6. Gradient is about 56 millimeters, the mean gradient. The cardiac function is good. These patients are suitable for transcatheter implantation of aortic valve. This is the procedure which is being shown here. I am sure most of you have seen it in your centers. The aorta is cannulated retrogradely, and the valve is deployed in the aortic position after dilatation of the valve. That is the aortic valvuloplasty is done, and the valve is deployed when the patient's heart rate is artificially increased by pacing to about 150 to 200 to be able to deploy the valve. Here the aortic valve is stenosed and the valve is being deployed, and the valve will expand. You can see the coronary ostia here. Now, last bit of my presentation relates to the influence of anesthesia on the pressure gradient measurements. The measurement of pressure gradient across the aortic valve is often done preoperatively using transthoracic echocardiography in awake patients. But when we subject these patients to anesthetic using balanced anesthetic technique and general anesthesia using endotracheal intubation and positive pressure ventilation, there are changes in the loading conditions, and also the changes because of respiratory variations in the heart and lung interactions, inspiration versus expiration. During inspiration, the LV stroke volume is increased, and in the expiration, the LV stroke volume is decreased. This increase in the stroke volume of the LV normally occurs as a result of compression of the pulmonary vasculature by the inspiratory stroke of the ventilation, leading to increased left atrial filling pressures, and hence the LV preload is increased, and then the LV stroke volume increases during inspiratory phase of the respiratory cycle, especially when you're using tidal volumes of at least 8 ml per kilo. And hence this has not been highlighted in the literature, but we know that this study done by our group, which has been published in the Indian Journal of Indian Academy of Echocardiography, amply demonstrates that the endotracheal anesthesia, general anesthesia using endotracheal tube and positive pressure ventilation alters the pressure measurements or the pressure gradients across the aortic valve. And what we have done is we studied the relationship between the TTE measured gradient across the aortic valve obtained in the awake state and compared that with the TE measured gradients across the aortic valve during general endotracheal anesthesia. And what is the influence of respiratory events on the mean pressure gradient across the aortic valve as measured by TEE under general anesthesia during pre-CPB period? And what happens if you increase the tidal volume from 8 to 10 and 12 ml per kilo during positive pressure ventilation? The pressure gradients were measured using the continuous wave Doppler, ensuring that the echo beam is parallel to the flow of blood, and the tidal volumes were used were 8 ml, 10 ml, and 12 ml per kg. And for during anesthesia, we use the deep transgastric aortic valve long axis view to be able to get the pressure gradients accurately. And we use the grading of the severity of aortic stenosis as described by Baumgartner in 2017. This I have already alluded to: mean gradient of greater than 40, aortic valve area less than 1 square centimeters, peak jet velocity greater than 4, and the dimensionless time index less than 0.25 were used as to quantify the aortic stenosis. And there were 100 patients. The age was about 58, and the patients underwent aortic valve replacement, and some of them, to be exact, 18 of them underwent CABG with AVR because they also had associated coronary artery disease. The pressure mean pressure gradients across the aortic valve when compared to TTE, the trans-esophageal echocardiographic emissions were significantly decreased. Please note that TE gradients were much less, significantly less. And if you compare the inspiration to expiration, inspiratory pressure gradients were greater. Please note these 2 points. That is one, the transthoracic echocardiographic pressure gradients. Well, let us take the mean pressure gradient because that is more accurate, of more indicative of the degree of severe stenosis. So the mean pressure gradient decreased from 60 to about 40 millimeters by about 20 millimeters, having taken care of that the systolic blood pressure is at least 100 to 140 millimeters. So this is an important finding. The aortic pressure gradient measured during anesthesia with positive pressure ventilation using TEE was significantly less. And if you compare inspiration versus expiration, the expiratory values were significantly less. This corroborates our surmise that there are changes in the loading conditions after anesthesia, and also the stroke volume is increased during positive pressure ventilation during the inspiratory phase. Then when you increase the tidal volume from 8 to 10 and 12 millimeters of mercury, there was no major change in the pressure gradient. They remained the same. There were no pressure gradient, which means that the change in the tidal volume from 8 to 12 ml per kilo did not influence the measured pressure gradient and the aortic valve area. So this we concluded that the TEE pre-CPB pressure gradient underestimated the severity of aortic stenosis, but that's why we need to carefully interpret the data obtained in the TEE, because the awake pressure gradients are much greater, and also the pressure gradient is significantly higher during inspiratory phase as compared to the expiration. And also the increase in the tidal ventilation from 8 to 10 and 12 ml per kilo did not alter the pressure gradients. These are the findings of the study. And I think that is my last slide. And if this presentation is open for discussion. Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, any comments or welcome questions or comments?
Thank you, sir, for the wonderful talk.
Thank you.
Other point is even this one during systole, the distance between the tips of
Yes,
the
yes.
leaflets. Also, one of the factors in anything less than 8 mm and more than 8 and more than 12 recent.
Yes, the doming of the valve and also the distance between the tips of the aortic leaflets also indicates it's a morphological indication of the presence and severity of the aortic stenosis.
Regarding the assessment, sir, peak to peak and instantaneous, it's because of law
Yes.
of mass conservation. That is the one, because it is routinely asked the question, which one is you believe, whether the peak to
Please
peak
say that
gradient,
again. I didn't get the first part of the question.
whether the peak to peak or instantaneous peak is which is more significant. It's
In the
because of
echocardiography, we get the instantaneous pressure gradient, and the severity of the aortic stenosis by echocardiography is determined by the pressure gradient obtained in the echocardiography, and
because of
usually the mean pressure gradient is same, and we use the mean pressure gradient, and hence whether you are using the peak to peak or instantaneous pressure gradient, as long as you are going by the mean pressure gradient, you are okay.
okay. This is what you told. It's related to the pressure recovery, sir. Pressure recovery.
No, it is not. See, pressure recovery occurs when the aortic root, aortic proximal ascending aorta is small. There it becomes significant problem. But if it's more than 3 centimeters in diameter or greater than 3 centimeters, it does not matter. It's not a big problem.
In assessment of bicuspid aortic valve, they tell because of the aortopathy, so we should address anything more than 3.5 to 4. In
Yeah,
one
the
in New
criteria
Zealand
for
and all, they conducted a study where they, irrespective of the, you said no, sir, ejection fraction, you're asymptomatic or asymptomatic, but they
yeah.
tell irrespective of the symptoms or asymptomatic, you have to address.
Which one you're talking about, aortic stenosis or root
Bicuspid,
dilatation?
bicuspid.
No. What I meant to say that if the patient becomes symptomatic, there is a
What the
sense of
in one
urgency.
state?
You have
Yes,
to urgently address the issue because the
yes,
natural history dictates that the lifespan is 2 to 5 years.
yes.
Once patient develops angina, shortness of breath, or syncope, the lifespan is between 2 to 5 years. So you need to address it as soon as possible. I can't see the chat box because it says that any questions are there in the chat box. Paradoxical low flow, low grade aortic stenosis is a condition where there is low flow and low gradient, but the aortic the ejection fraction is near normal. This is a condition where the LV volume is low. So though the LV function is good, you may get low flow and low gradient. And hence these patients need to be addressed because once you address the aortic valve, the LV mass will regress in about 3 to 6 months, and the patient will have reverse remodeling and improvement in the patient's symptomatology and the lifespan as well. Does that answer your question, Dr. Sanjeevani? No, it is Ayesha Goel.
Sir, in a low flow, low gradient, whether balloon aortic, aortic balloon, this one, whether it will help, sir?
See, the iotoplasty, the balloon iotoplasty is reserved for those patients who are not fit for surgery or transcatheter insertion of the aortic valve. In those cases, as a measure to buy time or cause symptomatic improvement, especially if the patients are in failure, it can be offered, but that's not the first line of treatment of these patients.
They say that a mild air, you create a mild air, it will help for the ventricle.
Exactly, exactly. So that is reserved for those patients who are not candidates for surgical repair, surgical intervention, nor the transcatheter implantation. The difference between paradoxical low flow and low gradient aortic stenosis. See here the pseudo. What do you mean by pseudo aortic stenosis? When the dobutamine stress test is given, the aortic orifice actually increases. The aortic valve area increases, which means that patient's low flow, low gradient was as a result the aortic valve area, which is recorded lesser than 1 square centimeter, as a result of low flow. And once the flow is increased with the dobutamine, there is increase in the aortic valve area, which means that this aortic valve, what was recorded without dobutamine, is not exactly correct. So this is pseudo aortic stenosis.
Means aortic LV dysfunction is because of other cause, not because of the aortic stenosis per se.
Yeah, the other thing is that the patients may have contractile reserve decreased, and hence this will cause a decrease in the flow across the aortic valve. And if the flow increases and the aortic valve opens up a little bit greater than 1 square centimeters, it is pseudo aortic stenosis.
Good morning, sir. I am Dr. Vikam.
Yeah, tell me. Yes, hello. Hello. Can you hear me?
Sir, might be doctor have been disconnected, sir, due to network issues, sir. Any further questions from the attendees?
Low
Please ask
velocity, low
questions.
gradient aortic stenosis means that the effective aortic valve area is less than 1 square centimeters. Stroke volume is less than 35 ml per meter square body surface area. Stroke volume index, I mean to say, and the LVEF may be less than 40%, and the mean pressure gradient is less than 30 to 40 millimeters. In these conditions, dobutamine stress echo will differentiate true aortic stenosis from pseudo aortic stenosis, and also it will let us know about the contractile reserve of the left ventricle. So if the contractile reserve is poor, in patients when you give dobutamine, actually there may be worsening of the condition in a very poor contractile function, because patient is already in the ascending upper plateau region of the Frank-Starling relationship. So there may be worsening with dobutamine. So those patients are extremely have extremely poor prognosis. Is it beneficial to reduce the gradient under so that we can go on see?
Sir,
Yeah, tell me.
those patient will be benefited with the simple revascularization, sir.
Depends upon the
Um,
etiology of the reduced
Yes.
contractile function. If it is ischemic heart disease or if it is cardiomyopathy, in cardiomyopathy, there is no scope that the patient is likely to do good. But if there's a correctable lesion, if you do that, maybe patient may improve.
Yes.
Is it beneficial to reduce the gradient under GA to sail through until we'll go on CPB? See, one thing is, if you reduce the afterload, the gradient will increase and the patient will have a catastrophic event. Patient may have may suffer a cardiac arrest. So it is very vital to maintain the afterload and the gradient to some extent. At the same time, you cannot
Yes, sir.
increase it. We cannot
Sir,
increase
usually
it. Yes.
most commonest question they usually for us for PGs they will ask, sir, what is the most commonest, what is the inotropes you select after valve replacement
Very nice question. In a
for coming
typical
off
aortic
bypass?
stenosis, yes.
What is
In
the
a
support
typical aortic, yeah.
you use?
See, in a typical aortic stenosis, in a routine aortic stenosis, after aortic valve replacement, inotropes should be avoided as far as possible. That's the first statement I would like to make. Because LV
Yes,
is
sir.
hypertrophied and the oxygen consumption is greater, and hence anything which increases the oxygen consumption
Jeopardizing
will lead to stone heart. That is the first statement I make. But having said that, it all depends upon the what is the heart rate, what is the effect of the residual cardioplegia, what is the serum potassium level, and do you have a facility to do sequential pacing, that is the atrioventricular pacing. All these factors must be taken into consideration, and also visual inspection of the heart, how it looks, both on the echocardiography, TEE, and visual inspection must be taken into consideration. After taking these into consideration, if you have a sequential pacemaker, if the rate is the problem, you can increase the rate using AV sequential pacing and maintain or preserve the atrial contribution to left ventricular filling, which is very important in these patients. And then, if at all you need to use inotrope, the smallest dose and the mildest inotrope should be used. For example, dopamine, dobutamine, and then only you go on to stronger inotropes. And the problem in these patients is that they are also, because of the sometimes vigorous contractions, they may land up with what is called LVOT, LVOT obstruction, dynamic obstruction. So we need to consider the inotropes carefully in a individualistic manner, depending on the patient's physical condition at that point of time.
Yes. Sir, if
Is venodilator advisable in these cases? See, because these patients have LV hypertrophy, venodilators may be used, but these patients, because of the hypertrophy and decreased compliance, they may need increased filling pressures. So accurate monitoring of the filling pressure must be made, and the choice of venodilators can be included. What we normally do is to be able to give all the volume contained in the oxygenator at the end of bypass. We do increase the venodilator infusion rate for that particular point of time to be able to give back all the transfusate into the patient. And then once that is done and reasonable hemodynamic stability is achieved, you cut down on the venodilators and keep it at keep the venodilator concentration to the minimum.
Sir, what are all the protocol after valve replacement coming of bypass? If the
Yes.
patient is hemodynamically stable,
Yes.
whether you accept the gradients and all, if it is even if it is more also ppm or anything, you accept, or what's your advice?
Gradient across the aortic valve after the surgical procedure depends upon the
Hemodynamically, patient is
the
hemodynamically also stable.
see the gradients measured after bypass are influenced by the hematocrit, hemoglobin levels, and the heart rate, and if you are using inotropes. If you have control of all these factors, then the gradient measurement may be relied upon, and the gradient less than 35 millimeters of mercury, mean gradient, less than 20 millimeters, less than 20 millimeter mean gradient after the aortic valve replacement is acceptable.
No, if the gradient is so much high, you think ppm, you assess effective orifice indexed area, and you think it is a ppm or
Yeah, if the aortic root is small, the aortic annulus is small, to avoid ppm, you have to do the root direct enlargement and implant a valve which is suitable for that particular patient, considering the body surface area. If the aortic valve effective orifice area is less than 0.65 square centimeters per meter square of body surface area, that constitutes severe ppm, and the patient may come off bypass and may be all right post-operatively, but patient will continue to have symptoms of aortic stenosis for a long time to come. So this must be taken into consideration because we need to give symptomatic relief to the patient. The ratio of the effective orifice area and the body surface area has to be greater than 0.85
okay, sir.
centimeters square per square meter body surface area.
Okay, thank you, sir. Thank you,
Yeah.
sir.
Sir, good morning, sir. I'm Dr. V. Kumar from Delhi, sir.
Yeah,
Sir,
tell me.
Sir, what is the specific indication for transcatheter implantation of aortic valve, sir?
Very, very nice question. And now, initially, transcatheter valve implantation was advocated for elderly individuals with multiple comorbidities, especially patients who are more than 70, 75 years. Abroad, it was
Yes.
80 years, but in our country, it is 70 years with multiple comorbidities because the risk of surgery is high. But the criteria for transcatheter aortic valve implantation has been reduced in the recent past because of the success and the ease with which the TAVR procedures are being performed. Even in intermediate risk category patients, it is being used nowadays. But the thing is, all the transcatheter valves or tissue valves. So if you're going to use it for low risk patient, the patient is likely to come back for redo surgery after 10 years because the tissue valves do not last more than 10 years. They get degenerated and patient gets symptoms because of the aortic regurgitation, because they have valve degeneration which occurs, and patients have aortic regurgitation. They need to undergo a second procedure, which the cardiologists do argue that we can put a valve in that situation. You don't have to worry. So that is the thinking the cardiologists have. But from our point of view, young patients should probably have metallic valves, and elderly patients with comorbidities should have maybe subjected to transcatheter aortic valve implantation.
What I suggest, a young patient homograft will be suffice, sir.
Yeah,
Homograft.
if the patient is relatively young, you can do the Ross procedure or homograft. Ross procedure is they remove the native aortic valve, put patient's own pulmonary valve, and put homograft in the pulmonary valve position. So this will be especially used in young individuals less than 20 years and also in lady patients where they would like to have child. So where the burden of anticoagulation is much less. So in those cases, you may consider what Dr. Prabhu Shankar said about homografts can be used. That is the Ross procedure.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
In which patients aortic stenosis we put Swan-Ganz? In theory, if you look into the texts and some of the talks big people give, they advocate use of Swan-Ganz in all patients aortic stenosis, but that is impracticable in our situation. What we do is if severe aortic stenosis with or without impaired impaired LV function, we have a triple lumen and probably one sheath in the internal jugular vein. Swan-Ganz can be inserted anytime if there's a clinical deterioration. So it need not be inserted as a routine in all patients undergoing aortic valve replacement. If you have a Swan sheath inserted and use it when there is a deterioration, that will be good enough. Any other questions are there?
No, sir.
If there is no any questions, shall I?
Yes, please. Yes.
Yeah, I thank Murali sir for enlightening us the starting from anatomy to various assessment of T in aortic stenosis and the management, especially the pressure, low gradient conditions, pseudo or paradoxical or irreversible. I thank you, sir, for your wonderful talk, sir.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. See you tomorrow at 6:45. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you.